Hello and welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a Star Wars podcast from laughingplace.com. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I am the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at Laughing Place. This is episode number 182 of Who's the Bossk, and we will be discussing the latest two-part episode of Star Wars The Bad Batch, the animated series on Disney+. And for that conversation, I have invited back on the show my friend and fellow contributor to Laughing Place, Cole Geryak. Cole, how are you? Thank you for coming back on the show.
I'm doing well. Good to be back. Always a fun time. You know, it's the time of my life to be on Who's the Bossk.
I'm glad to hear it. Glad to have you back. Always enjoy talking about Star Wars with you. I just want to ask you before we get into Star Wars, how are you? How has your life been going? I know you're prepping for a wedding. Do you mention that at all? Or
Sure, yeah. I am prepping for a wedding. It's been a while since I was on this show. It's been at least a year and a half.
It was like a year and a half. Yeah, I just looked at that today.
Yeah, so gotten engaged since then. Mr. Mike is actually going to be the officiant of the wedding, so really pulls everything full circle here. So yeah, pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, this is a little like a side gig that I have going where I've been roped into officiating some weddings. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. I really enjoy it. I'll be there for that one too. You guys out there are not invited. Sorry. Maybe
very
some
small
of you are.
wedding. Very, very small.
Yeah, you might be invited. Who knows? I do want to ask about your continued contributions to Laughing Place. You do have a regular column called Extinct Attractions. What's been going on with that lately?
So I recently did a little series on shows from Tokyo Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really sad is that I already forgot the name of those shows. Like, I have to literally Google myself to remember the names of those shows. One Man's Dream, that's what it was.
Okay. So these are shows that you've not seen in person, but did you watch them on YouTube to prepare?
I watched them on YouTube, yeah. So One of them was at Disneyland and the other two were at Tokyo Disneyland. And what's interesting is the second one at Tokyo Disneyland was technically a sequel. It was called One Man's Dream 2.
Not Two Men's Dream.
Not Two Men's Dream, no. It didn't go Fast and Furious style.
Interesting. I gotta look into that. But that's where can people find I guess they just go to Laughing Place and search for Extinct Attractions, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. You've got a whole bunch of those going back years now. So go check those out at laughingplace.com. And then speaking of Extinct Attractions, we have to talk about what we've been doing lately, Wednesday evenings in Hollywood. You, me, and both of our significant others have formed a regular every Wednesday evening we go and do trivia. It's called Trivia Quest at the Scum and Villainy Cantina in Hollywood. For whatever reason, I've said this before on the show, I was hesitant to go to Scum and Villainy, but I've come to love it. Cole, why do you enjoy trivia so much down there at Scum and Villainy?
Well, I think what makes it so special is that it's all nerd trivia.
Yeah.
And you don't have to deal with all of those, like, which country has the most oil? And I'm like, I don't know. There's like 5 choices. So I think I like that our team does pretty well. And it's nice to do a trivia where you can finish near the top every time. Yeah. I'm going to be honest.
And yeah, when we first started going regularly, I think like the host came and thanked us for like being a new team that is regularly competitive with the established teams that are winning every week there. And we've come out on top twice now. We've won twice so far out of, I don't know, how many times have we gone? Like a dozen, maybe?
At least a dozen, yeah. And I mean, I think the more impressive thing is we've only finished lower than 4th one time.
Yeah.
And even that was controversial.
That was a contested one. Yeah, absolutely. But it is a tremendous amount of fun. Even last night, we did it last night. I said to my wife, we were both in a bad mood. We had a tough week, and I was like, "Oh, but trivia is going to cheer us up. It always does," and it did. Um, so yeah, if you're out there, if you're in the LA area, you should definitely take part in this trivia
Mm-hmm.
quest at Scum and Villainy. Highly recommended, and say hi if you do stop by there. Wednesday evenings starting at 8. We like to get there a little early and get a table and hang
It's
out.
busy.
Yeah. All right, let's do something called the 5 Star Wars questions. Cole, this is your 4th time on the show. I did a little research earlier, and that means you're up to level 4 of the 5 Star Wars questions. You ready for this?
I am. I prepared.
Okay, awesome. So level 4, 5 Star Wars questions. Number 1, do you have a favorite Star Wars weapon? And if you're picking a lightsaber or blaster, which most people are going to, please be specific as to its model or owner. But you don't have to pick a lightsaber or blaster. There are certainly other weapons in Star Wars that might be your favorite. Cole, which one is yours?
So I actually did not choose a lightsaber
Okay.
or blaster. I was thinking about it earlier. I was like, I don't know if there's a lightsaber that really calls to me. The blasters kind of blend together. And then I remembered that when I was younger in Lego Star Wars, I always loved playing as the bounty hunter so I could throw the thermal detonators and blow up the big silver objects. And so I went with thermal detonators, which for this week's episode really was a fitting choice, I feel like.
Yes. Yeah, lots of thermal detonators going off.
Yeah.
So thermal detonator introduced in Return of the Jedi when Leia's disguised as the bounty hunter, and she's got that basically the Star Wars equivalent of a hand grenade. And you can't buy a replica of this at Galaxy's Edge, though I wish you could. I have looked at, like, people are making replicas of them and selling them on Etsy, and I attempted to buy one of those because sometimes they'll make it with like the working lights and sounds and everything.
That is cool.
But yeah, that's a really great outside the box choice there.
I feel like if you ask the TSA and you bring one of the Coke bottles from Galaxy's Edge, then you kind of can bring a thermal detonator with you.
That's true. Yeah, there was that whole thing where the Coke bottles, I think I have some up. I don't know if you can see them, but there's some up there.
Yeah.
They kind of look like the thermal detonators from you could get them at Galaxy's Edge. Number 2. So here we get into some going outside of the Star Wars galaxy a little bit. Which Star Wars actor has had your favorite career outside of Star Wars?
So it was an interesting one. So for me, I think it's like Harrison Ford's performance as Indiana Jones is my favorite outside of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is probably a pretty common answer because, I mean, it's Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. But I think if you're looking at holistic career, because I don't know how many Harrison Ford movies I've seen outside of the Indiana Jones movies in Star Wars. I think most of my Harrison Ford is within that realm.
Well, certainly you've seen the Fugitive, right?
I have, okay, yes. Yeah, my uncle is in it. He would not forgive me if I hadn't.
That's great, yeah.
But I actually think Rose Byrne might be my favorite. She was my celebrity crush for a while, and I felt like that was a pretty deep cut in the Star Wars universe to get to throw Rose Byrne in there. But her performance in Bridesmaids is it's top notch. In Neighbors, she's so good. Even X-Men First Class, I'm a fan. Like, I don't know. I really like everything she does.
And she's one of the handmaidens, right? Do you know?
Yeah.
Is it Dorme? Which one of the ones is she playing?
She's the one who lives in Attack of the Clones. She's not the one who dies at the beginning. She
doesn't get blown up. Okay.
Yeah.
But you don't know the name of
that.
I
think it might be Dorme.
Okay. It was one of those. They all have similar names.
It is Dorme.
Yeah. There's 3 books about them that I struggled to get through. But Rose Byrne, I don't think we've had that one before. So definitely a nice again, outside the box choice there. Mm-hmm. Number 3, same question, but with director. Which Star Wars director has had your favorite career outside of Star Wars?
This is a good one. I mean, I didn't even think, there's the TV shows too, but I don't think my answer would change if I included the TV shows. I'm going to go with Rian Johnson. Okay. Just a lot of his episodes of Breaking Bad are just so good. All 3 of them I really like. Looper, really great movie. The Knives Out movies are I just feel like every movie he makes is top notch.
Yeah. Oh, me too. Love Ryan Johnson as well. And yeah, I sometimes forget, even though Breaking Bad's one of my favorite shows, I sometimes forget that he dipped into that universe. He
Yeah,
did the episode Fly, which I think is kind of a love it or hate it
yeah,
episode in season, I want to say
3.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of that one? It's like a bottle episode, what you call a bottle episode in
Yeah,
TV.
I'm the pro Fly crowd. I
Okay.
wouldn't say I like love the episode, but I think it's like a silly idea that if you're just doing just a filler episode like that,
Yeah.
then it worked for me.
It's just Walt kind of going crazy
Yeah.
and obsessing over this fly that's gotten into the super lab. I like it too. I swear by Breaking Bad. So great
Mhm.
choice, Ryan Johnson. Number 4. I like this one a lot. What is your favorite Star Wars reference or Easter egg in other media? I always cite the example of Marty McFly saying, "My name is Darth Vader"
Mm.
in Back to the Future. So, do you have one of those that you really love, Cole?
I love ET, and I love
Yeah.
when he sees Yoda walking around and he goes home, home. And then when it connects into Phantom Menace, because the ETs are then
Yes.
one of the Senate. I just love how that built itself out like that.
Uh-huh.
Just one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's great. Also, as a fan of the action figures, I love an ET when they're when Elliot is showing ET all the Star Wars
Yeah.
action figures, and
And
you
he
get
shows him
a
Boba Fett, who had one line at that point, and it's
right,
like, he's
yeah.
so cool.
Yeah, great, wonderful choice there, ET and the Star Wars connection. Let's go to the 5th and final of the 5 Star Wars questions, level 4. And now I have a feeling that I know what this is based on your other comments today, but what is your favorite Lucasfilm project outside of the Star Wars franchise?
It's Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
There's no other answer. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That's perfectly fine. Certainly one of the best movies ever made. So
Yep, yeah, I
no
feel like you
arguing.
can't go wrong with that answer.
Yeah. What do you love about that film and the Indiana Jones franchise in general?
I think what draws me to it is just that he's like so cool.
Yeah.
Like there's just this feeling to him, and I think more so Harrison Ford than anything else. And he just like he just walks around and he does mundane things, and you're like, that is the coolest guy I've ever seen.
Yeah. That certainly has a lot to do with it. What did you end up thinking of this most recent Indiana Jones film that came out last year, The Dial of Destiny?
I liked it.
Yeah.
It's definitely not up there with the first or third one for me in terms
Mhm.
of like top notch level ones, but I did still enjoy it. I think Jim Mangold is a good director, so like
Yeah.
you at least had a nice floor to go off of. It couldn't be that poorly made, you know.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say I liked it, didn't love it, but I actually want to revisit it again. I think I saw it. I think I've seen it 3 times, and it's worth going back now that some time has passed and
Mhm.
checking it out again. Okay, that's the end of the 5 Star Wars questions for this week. Let's get into Star Wars headlines, and we got to start off with some sad news this time. Another member of the Star Wars family has passed away. Actor Michael Culver sadly died this week, and he is best known for playing Captain Nida in The Empire Strikes Back. So I always remember that line: "Apology accepted, Captain Nida." Um, so he gets choked to death by Darth Vader in the movie. I'm not sure how he passed away in real life, but I'm sad to hear that he did. Are you familiar with this actor outside of Star Wars, or is this the only thing that you would know him
The
from?
name is pretty familiar to me. I'm gonna be honest. Let's like
I took a quick glance at his IMDb, and he had a long list of credits, but I don't know if I would have recognized him
yeah.
outside of this role.
None of the other things are. He looks like he was just in a lot of British shows, right?
Yeah. So probably a British actor that, probably got cast as they were getting ready to shoot Empire over there in
Mhm.
outside of London. But a memorable role. He doesn't have a tremendous amount of screen time, but sad to hear that he passed away. So rest in peace to Michael Culver. Let's get into I guess more exciting news. This is something that kind of fell by the wayside and now might be back on in development at Lucasfilm. So there was an interview with Patty Jenkins, the filmmaker who we know from the Wonder Woman films. And for a while, she was making this Rogue Squadron movie. And then we thought, like so many of these announced Lucasfilm projects, we thought this had been abandoned in favor of other things. And now she says she's developing it again. But like so many of these stories, whoa, there's some street racing happening outside.
I was too slow to mute.
That's fine. I don't know, Cole. Do you think this is going to happen based on this news coming out, or I don't know? Should we take it with a grain of salt?
I don't know. What makes me think maybe is that they said they weren't. If I remember right, they said they weren't developing it anymore, and then it was announced. Then she said, "No, I'm back working on it."
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like the other times, like with Rian Johnson's trilogy, it was like, "Oh, I'm still working. But here they fully said no and then came back to it. So maybe that's a different sign. Maybe that's a more hopeful sign that it might happen.
Maybe. There are all these other Star Wars movies that are supposedly in development. Also, of course, there's Mandalorian and Grogu, which theoretically will be the next one. Then there's the Rey New Jedi Order movie that's going to be after that, and Taika Waititi, all these other movies that are in development. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if Rogue Squadron actually comes to fruition. But for now, apparently, Patty Jenkins is still in development on that. There was an announcement this week of a new exhibit at the Reagan Presidential Library, which is actually not far from here. And the exhibit's called Defending America and the Galaxy, Star Wars and the SDI, which I think was the Strategic Defense Initiative, something like that. And that was, there was a program developed under President Reagan in the 80s that was supposed to be able to shoot missiles down out of the sky if they're coming at us from Russia or whatever, USSR at that point. And it was nicknamed Star Wars, basically after the movie Star Wars. So I guess there's that connection there. And I was looking at the Reagan Library website, and they were like, this exhibit has no affiliation with Disney or Lucasfilm. So they didn't get any approval or anything for that. But have you been to the Reagan Library? I haven't gone there.
You've never been to the Reagan Library? No. That's kind of surprising because they've had a bunch of Disney exhibits over the years too. I feel like I've been a few times, mostly for those exhibits.
Okay.
Because they had one remember when a couple months ago, or I guess a year ago, they had the whole auction of all the Disney vehicles and everything like that. A lot of those were at the Reagan Library in an exhibit before. I think it was actually the archives who hosted it.
Okay.
But I mean, this makes sense that it's not affiliated because of the fact that it says SW. Or does it say Star Wars in the actual?
Oh, that's my abbreviation.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, imagine if they had to say SW too, just to make sure that they were not affiliated at all.
Right. No, it does say Star Wars on the website, but yeah, they made it clear that it wasn't done in conjunction with Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
But it does look interesting. I would like to learn more about that. I mean, it's just that the name basically came from Star Wars, the movie, but it does seem like an interesting exhibit, and that opens tomorrow as of this recording, March 15th, 2024 at the Reagan Library here in Southern California. Maybe I'll find time to go check that out and finally get to visit that location. Let's see. Comic books this week. There were 3: Mace Windu #2, Darth Vader #44, and the High Republic Adventures #4. I actually enjoyed all of these. I think of these 3, Mace Windu might have been my favorite of these 3 issues this week, but they were all pretty solid. You can go and read my reviews over at laughingplace.com. Getting into some merchandise news. Let's see. Our friends at Regal Robot have announced a new maquette replica of the alien called Klaatu from Return of the Jedi. He was one of Jabba's skiff guards in that movie. And you can get, I think starting March 19th, you'll be able to order this. So next week, you can order the Klaatu maquette replica. They make amazing stuff, really high quality stuff over there at Regal Robot, and it looks really neat. This is for the high-end Star Wars collectors market, so you can check that out at laughingplace.com or regalrobot.com. And then there's 2 new trading card games coming for Star Wars. One's called Star Wars Villainous: Revenge at Last, which is an expansion of Ravensburger's Star Wars Villainous games. Now, this Villainous has a bunch of different Disney, like I know Disney Villainous exists. Have you played any of these, Cole?
I haven't. I did. Is this the same as that Lorcana system, or is that different?
I think it's different from Lorcana.
Was that also Ravensburger though? Or
yeah, I think it is.
I waited in line at D23 to get my college roommate a card from the Lorcana game.
Okay.
That's the closest I've come to playing any of these games.
I have played. I think I played the previous Star Wars Villainous and reviewed it for Laughing Place. I don't remember tremendous amount about it, but it was fun from what I remember. And then Star Wars Unlimited, I want to say this is from Fantasy Flight Games, although I didn't make a note. That is also coming soon. So some new Star Wars trading card games. That's pretty exciting. I always enjoy that type of game, so I will have to check both of those out. And then in the world of apparel, we've got a new Grand Admiral Thrawn apparel collection from Heroes and Villains. That's the name of the brand. We've got a whole post about that over at Laughing Place. There's an Asajj Ventress limited edition Legacy lightsaber box set of 2 hilts, because Asajj uses 2 lightsabers, and that is available via the Disney store. I want to say it was previously only available at Doc Ondar's Den of Antiquities at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, so now you can pick that up on the Disney store. And then lastly, in merchandise, Lucasfilm has launched this new merchandise campaign called Imperial March for the month of March. And basically every week they're going to be revealing new merch from the Star Wars galaxy. This week, the companies were Hasbro. There's some toys coming out from the Black Series and the Vintage Collection. Then you've got Oxford. It's Oxford Pennants, actually. It's all one thing. I put a comma there where there shouldn't be. And then Jazzwares was the other company. And you can go and check out the full announcement of the Imperial March merchandise reveals over at laughingplace.com or at starwars.com. They have those as well.
Okay. I have one more.
Yes.
What about the Collective, the new Loungefly apparel line of menswear that has a Star Wars thing coming out?
That's true. I didn't realize. So there was a question about this. The reason you're bringing this up is there was a question about this at trivia last night, and we sort of got it right because we guessed. It was like, what 2 properties are represented by this new line called the Collective from was Loungefly? Yeah. And we guessed that it was Star Wars and Marvel, and the correct answer was Star Wars and Loki. So it was like a little bit more specific than that, but he gave it to anybody who just said Star Wars and Marvel anyway. But there was one team that said Star Wars and Loki, and they got to take home one of those items.
Yeah, I think it was a bag or something. They got a piece of the merchandise. They were the big winners.
Right. And then today I actually, when I was going through the last weekend news in Star Wars to come up with this list, I noticed that there. So really? I had totally missed that Becca Burbank had put up a post about that collection, and I don't know why I didn't include it in this week's headlines, but yeah, maybe I just felt burned by having missed.
We still got it though. We
did get it. We
got the points. That's what matters.
True. The points is all that matters. Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the Bad Batch, Cole. Let's get into our main topic for this week. There were 2 episodes, kind of a 2-parter, released at the same time on Wednesday this week on Disney Plus. The titles of these episodes are Infiltration and Extraction. But before we talk about those, let's talk about Cole's history and relationship with the Bad Batch. Have you been watching this from the beginning? What do you think of this show overall?
I have watched it since the beginning. Overall, I'm kind of mixed on the show. I'm going to be honest. Not necessarily my favorite. Like, I just think that Clone Wars is a lot more successful in how they meld everyone, but you also have way more characters. I feel like it's a
Right.
little harder when you have like a core, basically 5 characters that you're trying to shape everything around. You
Yeah.
can't just jump to a different storyline back and forth. You have to be a little more linear. But in Rebels, I feel like they kind of figured out how to do that well.
Yeah.
But this season, I have liked more.
Yeah, I think it's found a really mature tone this season
Mm-hmm.
that I'm really enjoying. So it has improved in that way for me. And yeah, I kind of agree that before now I was kind of on the fence about it too. I think there were great episodes, there were middling episodes, and then there were some episodes that felt kind of disposable to me. I felt less
Mm-hmm.
like that this season. But
Yeah.
speaking of this season, what did you think of the previous 5 episodes before this week's two-parter?
I've liked most of them. I've definitely been paying more attention this season than
Yeah.
in previous seasons. Like other ones, I try to do it, and about 10 minutes in, I just kind of lose focus on the episode. But this has kept me a little more locked in.
Okay.
Um, and I like that, like you're saying, more of that mature tone and feeling a little kind of like darker and grittier, I think is a lot more interesting in terms of what we're looking at. And then I liked the time when they were kind of like separate and having to work together to like get back to each other. It
Right.
just like created some different tension than what we normally see, I feel like.
Cool. Yeah, I think I would agree with that pretty much. These 2 episodes, Infiltration was directed by Stuart Lee and written by Brad Rao, and then Extraction was directed by Saul Ruiz and written by Jennifer Corbett and Matt Michnovitz, with the story editor being Matt Michnovitz for both of those episodes that came out this
Busy
week.
guy.
Yeah. And then let's talk about this two-parter. What were your general? Now you just watched these today, right?
Yeah, I finished it about 15 minutes before we
Okay.
recorded. So very fresh on the mind right now.
Terrific. So what were your initial thoughts coming out of this two-part episode?
I liked them a lot. These were, I think, up there with my favorite episodes of the season so far. Just I think that they did something a little bit different with it. I especially loved like the first half of the first episode when we're kind of like following Rex's storyline a little bit more, and I
Yeah.
feel like it was cool to see this like merging of characters.
Right. It definitely is a Rex heavy two-part episode. And I think I would say the first time I watched these, I was a little, because I went into it knowing, oh, it's a two-part episode. There's gonna be a lot of big stuff happening. And I think I was a little disappointed that there wasn't more like forward momentum in the story, because at the end of this episode, much like the end of the last episode, there wasn't a change in like the overall like status
Mhm.
quo of the Bad Batch. They're still on the run from
Yeah.
Dr. Hemlock and got all the clones chasing them and stuff. But the second time I rewatched the episodes today, and I was trying to figure out like, what are they trying to tell us with this episode? Why focus on Rex? Why have so much of the focus also be on these what are called Clone X troopers? So basically, in the beginning of this episode, Rex is protecting these 2 senators that are having a secret meeting, and then this assassin comes out and tries to kill them, and they capture him, and it turns out to be another clone who's been basically like brainwashed by the Empire on Mount Tantus. And these 2 episodes are really about like telling us what's going on with these clones. And we're going to
Mhm.
get into that more in a little bit. But first I want to talk about the voice cast, because I really wanted to point out, since we're talking about the clones, like, it's totally insane to me how many different characters
It's crazy.
are voiced by one voice actor in the show. So D. Bradley Baker, he stars as all of the Bad Batch, which are Hunter, Wrecker, Crosshair, Echo, and Tech, who has passed away theoretically. Tech was not in this episode, but those 4 guys. And you have Captain Rex, carried over from the Clone Wars, Commander Scorch, Commander Wolf, another character from the Clone Wars and Rebels. There were also other clones named Fireball, Greer, Hauser, Lieutenant Hilo, Samson, and Nemec, and then also D. Bradley Baker voiced the clone X Troopers that I mentioned, and he's voicing Batcher, who is the Lurka Hound, little dog-like creature that has now joined the team. Are you as impressed by his talents as I am, Cole?
I'm gonna be honest, even just thinking about this episode, and this was like unprompted from like with your big voice cast note here,
Yeah.
I was literally thinking, is this the television show where one character voices more dialogue, or one person voices
Yeah.
more dialogue than any other show? Like
Right.
maybe South Park beats it, but that's probably about it.
Yeah, some of those animated sitcoms like The Simpsons, you have, Dan Castellaneta and Harry Shearer and uh Hank Azaria, and they've got a handful of roles
Yeah.
each, but it's never like I feel like I'm picturing D. Bradley Baker just having these long conversations with himself voicing all these different characters.
Yeah.
And I've seen him do it on stage, like at Star Wars Celebration, they'll have during the Bad Batch panel, they'll have D. Bradley Baker and Michelle Ong there, and they'll do a read through, and it's Michelle Ong doing Omega, and then D. Bradley Baker doing all the other
It's
characters.
crazy.
It's kind of like watching a magic trick. The way that these are all supposed to be clones of the same person, Jango Fett,
Yeah.
but they all have their own unique personalities, and they all really do have their own distinctive voices that you could probably pick out even if you weren't watching the
Yeah.
screen. You could probably identify which of the clones was talking. So it's super, super impressive, and I think this is why they basically created this show to have D. Bradley. It's like a showcase of D. Bradley Baker's voice
Yeah.
talents. Just incredibly impressive.
I'd be curious
Yeah,
to see how he actually records it, because I
right.
feel like he's doing that at like conventions as more of a parlor trick, right? I feel like he can't actually be doing like these 5-minute dialogue scenes straight of switching from character to character. Like
Yeah.
that seems crazy to me.
Right. You have to imagine, somebody is like reading the other lines maybe to
Yeah.
him. And I'd be curious to see some of those recording sessions too. Guest stars this week, we had Sian Clifford playing the droid at the beginning. GS8 was the name of the droid. And then Senator Avi Singh. This character came back from an earlier episode of The Bad Batch. I think it was season 1. But then that character was voiced by a different actor, Alexander Siddig, who you might know from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And now Danny Jacobs is voicing him. So he had kind of a change in cast there. And then Jennifer Hale returned as Senator Chuchi, who was in last season a lot, I believe. And then David W. Collins played just a regular old stormtrooper in there somewhere as well. Let's get into the story a little bit. So I mentioned that it opened with those two senators meeting, and this kind of feels like they're planting the seeds of the rebellion a little bit. Now, we don't see these two senators later on in like Andor or anything, but I don't know. What was your take on this meeting? What do you think is actually going on between these two senators from different planets? And they also mentioned, they were on opposite sides in the Clone Wars, but now they find themselves united against the Empire. But what was your thought about that kind of clandestine meeting?
Yeah, I was thinking similar things of like planting those seeds of the rebellion. But yeah, what stuck out to me most was them acknowledging that they had been on different sides in the past, and now
Yeah.
we're trying to be on the same side going forward. Because like when you're thinking about it, it was only a couple of years before that they were fighting against each other. Like it's
Yeah.
not that long in the just like grand scheme of time. So kind of interesting to see how quickly the Emperor was the worst, that everyone was like, oh no, we can't do this.
Right. So I thought that was interesting, like you said, but it gets interrupted pretty quickly. And then the remainder of these two episodes are about these clone X troopers. So I want to get into this a little bit. And I was like, well, who, and we kind of figured we had been introduced to this idea of these sort of brainwashed clones that are working against our protagonists. As these episodes went on, especially on my second viewing, I tried to figure out what they're trying to tell us about these clones. But before I give you my like little theory and
Mhm.
prediction, I kind of want to get your thoughts. What do you think is happening here? Why are these clones so important?
Yeah, I thought they were pretty cool. I especially liked how they used them in the second episode. This I don't think this necessarily has to do with why they're important, but they
Yeah,
gave me real Terminator vibes.
sure.
Especially the way that the one in the second episode was kind of limping around. It really just felt like the Terminator who just couldn't be stopped. And I feel like, yeah, it
Right.
was, I guess it's going along with that idea of the Empire building out this unstoppable force to make sure that no one can ever compete with them.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good read on it. All right, here's my little theory about these clone X troopers, and especially the second one that gets, because we see that one at the beginning
Mhm.
that tries to interrupt that meeting. He does interrupt the meeting. He gets captured by Rex and his team and kind of interrogated. They take out that little thing that goes in his teeth that you can bite, and
Mhm.
it's kind of like the equivalent of the poison that
Yeah.
spies would use, in Star Wars Galaxy. Um, and they find basically when Crosshair and the others, when the Bad Batch arrive, Crosshair tells them that these clones have had their memories wiped, their personalities like wiped
Mhm.
away, and they're reprogrammed, right? Also, this second clone X trooper that shows up to kind of we get the title Infiltration from this guy showing up and infiltrating Rex's hideout. Um, we never see his face. We never see this guy's face, the second
Nope.
clone X trooper that shows up. There's a big fight at the end between the clone X trooper and Crosshair, where they're fighting in a big like river and a waterfall, and it ends with one of the other clones saving Crosshair, and this clone X trooper kind of tumbles off down the waterfall, and we think. Actually, I thought at that point that was the end of that guy, but there's a
Mhm.
shot near the end where we see him like coming out of the river, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, why is this like? Why are they telling us that he survived? Okay, here's my prediction. I have no knowledge of what's coming after this. I have not seen any episodes past this. I think that clone X Trooper is Tech.
Mm.
Do you think I'm completely off about this, or what do you think about that?
I think that'd be interesting. Yeah, because it does feel weird, like, because they haven't shown any homages to him throughout this whole
Yeah,
season, really. Like, they've really just been like, oh, Tech is dead, and then never have really mentioned him again,
right.
or at least in very passing. So I think you could be onto something there.
Yeah,
That would make sense.
I came into this season with like this sneaking suspicion that they're gonna find they the Bad Batch has a history of not really killing off. I mean, this is true of Star Wars in general, and like Marvel comics,
Yeah.
whatever. Not really killing off characters because audience members grow to love these characters, and you don't really want to see them die. So you have to figure out a way. It's kind of like Bucky. It's kind of like the Winter
Yeah.
Soldier, right? Like, okay, Bucky for a long time in Marvel comics, he was like the only character they never resurrected, and then eventually they did resurrect him as the Winter Soldier, and the same
Yeah.
thing happened in the Captain America movies and everything. So I feel like this is Tech basically getting the Winter Soldier treatment and being brainwashed
Mm.
and set against his old friends. Again, I have no confirmation. I don't know any spoilers beyond this point, but this is my little theory going forward that it will be revealed that Tech has been had his uh, memory wiped, has his personality wiped. Whenever that character talked, it was like muffled and
Mhm.
disguised. So we couldn't really get a sense of what his voice actually sounded like. But yeah, I think that guy might be Tech.
Know what else? We see him when we see him falling down
Yeah.
like basically just like all of eternity, and then he shows his resurrection out, and that could be the like just corresponding, right, with how Tech passed away,
Right.
because we never saw him disappear. We just saw him falling, and
Yes.
then it connects to it. I think you're onto something here.
That's a good point too. Yeah, I haven't really looked in to see if anyone else has had this same theory. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody else has come up with it too. Usually I'm pretty far behind on this kind of stuff, but yeah, I'm putting it out there now and we'll see what happens later on in the season. The other main focus of this episode, like we mentioned before, was Captain Rex, who, he's come and gone in the Bad Batch. He was a pretty heavily focused on character in the Clone Wars. But Cole, what did you think of Rex's role in this episode? And I guess where I'm going with this is, do you feel like this is like the final hurrah for Rex in the Bad Batch, or will we see him more through the rest of the season?
So yeah, I really liked when he was there. Rex is one of my
Yeah.
favorite characters from the Clone Wars, so I was very excited that we got to spend the first 10-15 minutes, especially that first episode, really just with him.
Yeah.
I don't think so, though. I think we're going to keep seeing him because they are really focused on getting to Tantus.
Yeah,
They are really focused. That I don't think that they're letting the Bad Batch like get there without them at this point.
The only reason I thought that was like because of that final conversation that Hunter has with Rex at the end of the episode, where Rex is like, you got to figure out why the Empire wants Omega so badly. And it just made it seem like Rex was kind of handing off that task to Hunter and he was going to go and do his own thing. But maybe you're right. Maybe he'll rejoin them as a, the team will just get bigger as they reabsorb Rex and Echo and these few other clones. I didn't really put this in the outline, but another clone that popped up, I mentioned in the voice cast list, D. Bradley Baker voicing Commander Wolf again. Now, Wolf, we knew from the Clone Wars. Then he shows up in Rebels when we meet Rex's gang again. So we know that he survives all this and kind of, loses his dedication with the Empire, becomes disenchanted with the Empire and comes to help, the crew of the Ghost fight the Empire later on. But what did you think of Wolf's little arc in this? Because he starts off the episode, or I think we see him first at the end of Infiltration, and then he's pretty heavily present in Extraction, and it ends with the climactic moment of Rex kind of talking him out of continuing to pursue Omega, or like letting the Bad Batch go, letting Omega go, because as he says, like, you're hunting a child.
Yeah.
But I don't know, what did you think of Wolf's whole arc in this episode?
Yeah, I thought it was cool to add another layer to it, right? Of having a humanity to the clones that you would think disappeared with Order 66, like, but still being a follower of the Emperor, but like having that wherewithal to say, no, we're going to let her go. Like, it just added a nice extra layer of complexity that I feel like is really what makes the clones so interesting.
Right, because he also has those couple moments where he's talking to that Clone X trooper that I theorize might be Tech, and he's like upset with him for basically going in guns a-blazing and almost killing. The base has been destroyed basically, and then when they take off in that shuttle or escape pod or whatever that is, he shoots it down, and Wolf is like, well, what our mission is to take her back alive and unharmed, and you're basically shooting down her ship, which is, at that point he's just following his orders, but by the end he kind of lets his morality take over rather than just like slavishly following what he's been told. I don't know, I thought it was an interesting arc. It was cool to see that character again. He's got a weird eye, right?
Yeah.
Like his physical trait that sticks out among the other clones.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else that you would like to say about this particular episode before we move along?
No, I mean, yeah, think it was just a nice little like kind of change of pace where like yes, they still are on the same mission that they were on, but at least it kind of felt a little more personal with them
Yeah,
getting chased, you know, like.
right.
And I know what else I think is interesting is that right now they're being chased by Hemlock, but they're also chasing Hemlock,
Yeah,
right? Which is a kind of interesting place to be in.
that is interesting. Yeah, they are being pursued, like you just said, and they're also trying to find where he is.
Yeah.
Um, the question is, like, once they do find out where Tantus is, it's on a planet called Wayland, by the way. Um,
Utani?
once they figure that, what's that?
Utani, like
Yeah,
from
Wayland
Alien?
Utah. Yeah, I think it is. I think it might be actually a little tongue-in-cheek reference to the
Yeah.
Alien franchise. Um, once they do figure out where it is, I wonder if they'll bring, like, they're gonna be hesitant to bring Omega with
Mm-hmm.
them because she's the one they want, but at the same time, this has come up so many times in the last season or so
She's always
where
going to go with them.
Omega just insists on going with them, which is fine. She considers herself part of the team just as much as Hunter or Wrecker or Echo, so she has earned that ability to be included, I think, and I
Mm-hmm.
would expect them to bring her along, even though it's going to be putting her back in direct danger of being
Yeah.
recaptured.
We are going to get a nice 5-minute scene, like happens every 3 episodes where
Yeah,
they're like, you can't come,
right.
Omega. And she's like, but I'm going to come.
Yeah,
Okay, but stay in the ship. I'm not going to stay in the ship.
that's the Bad Batch drinking game where
It really is.
every time Omega insists on coming along. Um, all right, so there's 8 episodes left. We're sort of at the halfway point, although I think the final episode of the series is going to be like double length. So I think really next week will be the halfway point of this season. Cole, what else are you hoping for or expecting from these remaining 8 episodes of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, the final season?
Well, I was thinking today, I feel like Omega has to die, right?
I don't know.
Because it feels like what they're leaning towards, obviously, is that her like blood is what's going to allow the Emperor to make his clone eventually in
Yeah.
Rise of Skywalker.
Hmm.
And that means they've got to get her, right? Like,
I suppose I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, they have to either get her or get somebody who has a similar M count. By the way, the M count kept getting dropped in this episode.
know what else though? But maybe not though, because when we get to Mandalorian, they're still looking for like Grogu to be able to use his blood, and that's what I kind of felt that was leaning towards too, at least in that first season.
Yeah, but I think that turned out to be Moff Gideon, like his little
Oh,
faction
it's his whole side.
of the Imperial Remnant. Like Moff Gideon wanted to clone himself. So I think that was kind of a red herring, and I think what we're getting into here might be the real deal.
So then, yeah,
Yeah,
she's got to go then, right? Like,
don't know.
or at
How
least they're
will
getting
they?
her blood.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. How does that get resolved? Very curious to see how that turns out in the next. Anything else you're looking forward to, or any characters you hope pop up?
I want to keep seeing more of those Clone X troopers.
Yeah, I think
And I
that's
mean,
gonna be
if
yeah,
one is tech, then we're gonna keep seeing them. But I just
yeah,
thought they really like the way that they kind of like just strolled around and like they were just cool, you know? And I feel like you don't have as many just cool characters in Bad
right.
Batch. So it was nice to have a change of pace where you're like, I don't really care why this guy's here, but he's really cool as he walks around.
Yeah, they got to make this into an action figure, the Clone X. And if it does
Yeah.
turn out to be Tech, I'm sure we'll get Tech as the Clone X with
Yeah.
the removable helmet. That's all I want to see. Okay. Well, I think that's going to bring us to the end of our discussion of the Bad Batch for this week, and we'll get into our final segment here on Who's the Boss. It's called First Steps into a Larger World, where we talk about the media that we've been consuming and or enjoying outside of Star Wars. My example this week is I was recommended this independent, low budget sci-fi movie called The Vast of Night, and I watched it on Hulu and really was very impressed by it. You can tell it's low budget. It's shot in a small town, I think in Texas, and it's mostly just two characters like walking around and talking. And there's very, very long shots. Like, I want to say there's a couple shots in this movie that go on for like 10 or 15 minutes. And then there's one in like right smack dab in the middle. There's this really long tracking shot that goes through the entire town and like through like a high school gymnasium and up and out the window and like across a field. It blew my mind. I was like, how did they do this one? Like, there's exactly one like really impressive, like show offy kind of shot. And the rest of the movie is all like just like close-ups of people talking. But I really enjoyed it. It's really interesting. If you like sci-fi, the whole thing is like an homage to the Twilight Zone. It's kind of presented in that kind of format. Actually, I saw on IMDb that Mark Silverman, the guy who did the voice of Rod Serling in the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, did a Rod Serling impression for the like fake Twilight Zone intro that they did in this movie. So I like that about it. It's really unique. It's a very like talky movie, but it is it's kind of about like a UFO panic, and it's set in the 1950s. I'd recommend checking it out if you haven't watched it already. But that's my example for this week. How about you, Cole? What have you been watching, reading, playing anything lately?
Well, first, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, like I love a long tracking shot. Few things give me more joy than that. Like I'm like, oh, now I'm all in on this movie. Long tracking
and
shot.
It's a short movie too. You could watch. It's like 90 minutes or less.
Oh,
it's like 86 minutes or something. So will not take you long to get through. The Vast of Night, it's called.
I'm going to be honest. I've been pretty busy lately, so I haven't consumed quite as much. But I have been really loving this season of Survivor.
Okay.
That I have kept caught up on. I don't know. Just everyone on this season's a little bit catty, and it's really adding some fun drama to it that has really been keeping me locked in this season.
Yeah, you've mentioned your love of Survivor as we hung out at trivia a couple times. And is this something that you've watched now? How old is Survivor at this point? Like 20 plus years?
I haven't watched it that long. I think I started about season 28 or so. So I've watched almost half at this point, because that's.
But they do like 2 a year, right?
46. Yeah. Okay. 46, I think.
And my mom swears by Survivor as well. I just never got into it. I don't know why it never caught on with me. But what do you love about the show?
I don't know. I think it's just like that. I think I like that it's like you get all these funny personalities, but then they have to betray each other.
Yeah.
But they also have to compete in physical challenges. There's just so many different elements that, like, even if one kind of falters in an episode, maybe the other thing is good. Like last week, they had to make an arch of letters, and it took each team like 30 minutes to make this arch. Like no one could do it, and it was just spelling out a word.
Amazing. Yeah, the only like reality competition show that we watch is Lego Masters. And I feel like it's probably a little bit of a different thing because everyone is so nice to each other and like supportive of each other on those shows. So it's not like they're stabbing each other in the back and like forming alliances and voting off the island and that kind of thing. So cool, interesting. I don't know if I'll ever get into Survivor, but I like hearing people talk about it. Let's wrap up this episode of Who's the Bossk with by thanking Cole Geryak for coming back on the show to chat about Star Wars: The Bad Batch with me. Cole, thanks again for coming back. Where can people find you? Do you want to send people anywhere? Do you want people to find you? Social media or anything like that?
Well, you can find all my stuff on Laughing Place if you just search my name, Cole Geryak, Geryak. All the extinct attractions, as well as the interactive maps that we have on there as well, where you can look at all of the parks, all the Disney parks throughout their entire history, and basically look at what attraction was where at every time.
Yeah, that interactive map thing that you put together. I feel like this is like the unsung, underappreciated aspect of Laughing Place that not enough people know about. I'm glad you brought it up because I always forget to mention it. But if you find that, go and track it down on laughingplace.com. You could spend hours just like exploring all the different it's pretty much every year that the parks have been in existence,
Every
right?
single year for every Disney park, yeah.
Yeah. So you
And
can,
it's updated all the time.
yeah, amazing. Pick a year, pick a park, and look at the map for that year and look at all the different attractions that were there. Such a neat thing that not enough people have discovered and taken advantage of. So definitely go check that out. I want to plug something real quick. My other podcast called Pop Culture Explorers Club that is still in its infancy, but we did record an episode this week about the X-Men. So there's this new show X-Men 97 coming out on Disney Plus. So I thought it would be a good time to talk about the X-Men franchise in general. And for that episode, we brought in Mike Mack, who is the Marvel guy at laughingplace.com, even though Pop Culture Explorers Club is not affiliated with Laughing Place. It was kind of LP was represented there. Yeah. And he's a great guy to talk to about Marvel. So that's about the whole X-Men franchise going back to the comics, the cartoon from the 90s, the movies, and then into our anticipation of everything to come from the X-Men, including the X-Men 97 cartoon and Deadpool and Wolverine and the X-Men joining the MCU. So check that out over at Pop Culture Explorers Club, wherever you find your podcasts. On the next episode of Who's the Bossk, we'll be talking about the next episode of The Bad Batch, season 3, episode 8, and that'll be coming next week. As always, please visit laughingplace.com for all your news, all your Disney news and opinions. I'm on Instagram at Who's the Bossk Pod. That's going to wrap it up for this week. My name is Mike Celestino. Thank you out there for listening or watching. Let's see. Do we get any comments? Let's say hi to Stephen Rocky Singleton from Cheyenne, Wyoming. Sorry if I missed you, Stephen. Hopefully you're still there. He's the comment that we got. But that's going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of Who's the Bossk. See you next time. Thanks so much for listening and or watching. And let me find the I can't ever find there. Thanks for watching. Here we go. Talk to you soon. Take care. Thanks Cole for joining me. And thank you out there. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.